darkness, truths unravel. Welcome to Darkroom Narratives, where every story leaves a shadow.
Hello, friends. I present to you a new work, Shadow of a Forgotten City.
A thick shroud of fog cloaked the abandoned city, where the jungle had devoured crumbling stone temples. The shadows of branches swayed in the wind like grasping hands clawing at the air. Two treasure hunters, Taras and Lina, pushed their way through the dense undergrowth, their lanterns flickering in the darkness. Taras stopped beside a moss-covered altar carved from black stone. "This is it," he whispered, tracing the engraved symbols with his fingers. Lina frowned as she held up the map. "Something's wrong. These symbols, they're pulsing." Suddenly the altar trembled and the air turned thick, as if a storm were about to break. The ground cracked beneath their feet, releasing a bluish glow. Taras shouted as his lantern went out, and from the fissure a shadow emerged, faceless, but with eyes that burned crimson. "Run!" Lina screamed, but the shadow was already after them, seeping through the trees like smoke. Taras's heart pounded as he heard its whisper, indecipherable but piercing, like a blade scraping bone. They ran, but the jungle seemed to close in around them, branches whipping at their faces as the shadow drew nearer, its claws outstretched. For adventure reading. The jungle breathed with a damp stench, its branches closing overhead like a trap. Lina's lantern flickered, casting a faint glow on the vine-choked ruins. Taras, stumbling, gripped his knife, though he knew it was useless against this shadow. They ran without looking back, but the spirit's whisper pierced the air, low, guttural, like stone grating against stone. Lina suddenly stopped near a half-collapsed archway, behind which loomed a pitch-dark void. "Here!" she shouted, pointing to a narrow gap between stone slabs. Taras, gasping, dove in after her, but felt a cold breath at the nape of his neck, as if the shadow was only steps behind. The passage led them into a circular plaza surrounded by statues with hollow eye sockets. In the center stood another altar, smaller, but marked with the same symbols as the first. Lina, trembling, held up the map she'd found a month ago in an archive. "This isn't just treasure, Taras. These symbols, it's a warning." Taras wasn't listening. His gaze had locked onto one of the statues. Had it moved? No, just the wind. But his heart clenched with dread. "We shouldn't have touched that altar," he muttered, remembering how the symbols flared blue beneath his fingers. Suddenly, the air began to hum, like a swarm of insects filling the plaza. The shadow reappeared, no longer smoke, but a towering figure with blurred edges. Its crimson eyes blazed, and its voice thundered, "You have awakened what was sleeping." Lina grabbed Taras's hand and pulled him behind the nearest statue. "What does it want?" Taras whispered, sweat dripping down his back. Clutching the map, she murmured, "It's not just a spirit. It's guarding something. Maybe treasure. Maybe something worse." She unfolded the map, and in the lantern's dim light, new lines appeared, as if drawn by an invisible pen. They led straight to the center of the plaza, to the altar. The shadow howled, closing in, its claws, long and crooked, scraped the stone, leaving deep gashes. Terrace's body froze with fear, but Lina was already pulling him toward the altar. "We have to figure out what we activated," she shouted, though her voice quivered. They crouched beside the altar, and Lina ran her fingers across the symbols. They flared again, but this time the light was red, and the ground shook. The shadows screamed, a sound that pierced their bones, making their hearts pound in sync with the stone's vibration. "You saw the map. There's something there," Taurus shouted, noticing how the shadow suddenly recoiled as if something had halted it. Lina pointed at a new symbol on the altar, a circle with a broken line. "It's a seal," she whispered. "We broke it, but maybe we can lock it again." But as soon as her fingers touched the altar, the shadow lunged forward, and from under the earth a chorus of screams erupted, as if not one, but dozens of spirits had awakened. Taurus grabbed a stone from the ground, ready to fight, even knowing it was useless. Lina, clutching the map, realized they had two choices: destroy the altar or find a way to calm the spirit. But time was running out. The shadows multiplied, flooding the plaza.
The plaza buzzed with a low, ominous hum, as if the jungle itself were whispering curses. Shadows that had risen from the earth swirled around the altar, their crimson eyes glowing in the dark like beacons. Taurus pressed himself against the cold stone, gripping his useless rock, while Lina trembled, staring at the map where new lines pulsed as if alive. "We have to understand what this seal is," she hissed, as another spirit's scream tore through the air, raising goosebumps across their skin. The shadows crept closer, their claws scratching the stone slabs, throwing sparks. Lina touched the broken circle symbol on the altar, and suddenly her eyes closed, her body shuddered. "Taurus, what's happening?" He grabbed her shoulders, but she didn't respond. Her mind was being pulled elsewhere. A vision blazed behind Lina's eyes. The abandoned city came to life. Thousands of years ago, it had been a shining center of civilization. Towering temples gleamed with gold, and robed priests carved symbols into altars. She saw a ritual. Hundreds of people standing in a circle, chanting a hymn, until a priest plunged a dagger into a sacrifice's heart. Blood flowed over the altar, and the sky darkened. She understood. This wasn't treasure. It was a warning. The civilization had worshipped dark forces, and the spirits they summoned became uncontrollable, devouring souls. To stop the chaos, the priests forged a seal, a magical barrier that imprisoned the spirits within the altar. But it came at the cost of destroying the city. The last priest, dying, cursed anyone who would break the seal, vowing eternal pursuit. The vision shattered, and Lina gasped for air, her eyes flying open. "Taurus, this isn't just one spirit," she exhaled, just as the shadow lunged, dissolving inches from their faces. "It's an army. They destroyed this city." Taurus stared at the altar, pale. "So, we released them?" Lina nodded, clutching the map, where new symbols now appeared, depicting a temple deep within the jungle. "There's another altar. Maybe we can seal them again." But the shadows weren't waiting. They multiplied, hissing, forming grotesque figures. Some resembled warriors with spears, others hunched elders with burning eyes. Taurus cried out as one claw slashed his sleeve. Blood spattered, but the cut was shallow. "Run!" he yelled, pushing Lina toward the gap between statues. They raced through the jungle, branches lashing their faces, while the spirits' whispers buzzed behind them like a swarm. Lina gripped the map, feeling it grow warm in her hands. "That temple, it's close," she shouted, spotting the outline of a structure ahead, overgrown with vines. But the shadows were faster. One blocked their path, its eyes blazing. "You belong to us," it thundered. Taurus threw the stone. It passed through the shadow like smoke. Lina halted, spotting a carved symbol on the ground, the same as on the altar. She dropped to her knees and touched it. The earth quaked, forcing the spirits back. "This is their weakness," she cried. But the spirits regrouped, and their scream became thunder, promising death.
The jungle tightened its grip around Taurus and Lina as they leaned against the moss-covered wall of the ancient temple that had emerged from the undergrowth. The shadows seemed to have retreated, but their whispers still echoed in their ears, like the distant rumble of a storm. The symbol on the ground, the one Lina had touched, still glowed faintly, granting them a moment of rest. Taurus, breathing heavily, glanced at his bloodied sleeve, then at Lina, who clutched the map burning with warmth in her hands. "How did we even get here?" he muttered, a bitter edge of regret behind the fear. Lina, eyes fixed on the map, exhaled. "You wanted this adventure." Her voice trembled, but a spark of memory broke through. They fell silent. In that stillness, amid the creak of branches and the distant cry of some unseen creature, memories wrapped around them like fog. It had all started a year ago in a smoky bar in Sao Paulo. Taurus, weary of low-paying contracts, heard whispers of treasure in the Amazon, a lost city spoken of in hushed tones by smugglers. Lina, his partner of 5 years, had scoffed when he showed her a faded photograph, a yellowed map bought for cheap from a street vendor. "This is tourist nonsense," she'd said then, but her eyes had gleamed with curiosity. The map was just a scrap of paper, but the symbols, circles with broken lines, were too intricate to be fake. They spent months digging through archives, poring over old books and libraries across Lima and Manaus. Lina found a reference in a conquistador's 16th century journal. He described a city where gods turned against men and warned of seals that hold back the shadows. Taurus had laughed then. "Just a legend, Lina. The gold's real." They hadn't taken it seriously, believing they'd find ruins and relics they could sell. Preparation took half a year. They hired a guide, bought gear, and studied jungle routes. But a week before the trek, the guide vanished, leaving only a note: "Don't go there." Taurus convinced Lina it was just superstition, he said, hiding his own doubts. Once in the jungle, after a week of battling insects and rain, they stumbled upon ruins, too well preserved, too silent. Lina remembered her hand trembling as she deciphered the symbols on the first altar. "This isn't just treasure," she'd said, but Taurus had already touched the stone, and the light had flared. Now, in the temple's darkness, Lina gripped the map tighter. "We didn't know what we were doing, Taurus. This isn't treasure, it's a trap." Taurus nodded, his face pale. "So what now? Run? Or find that second altar?" But as soon as he spoke, the ground trembled again. The shadows began to hum, closing in. The symbol on the ground faded, and darkness swallowed their fragile refuge. Lina grabbed Taurus's hand. "We have to find the temple with the seal, or we won't make it out." The shadows surged forward, their screams blending with the wind, promising the end. The darkness within the temple pulsed, as if the heart of the jungle beat in rhythm with the howls of the shadows. The vine-covered walls seemed alive, and the air thickened like tar. Terrace and Lina, pressed tightly together, raced down a narrow corridor, guided only by the dim glow of the map in Lina's hand. The symbols on it burned red, leading them deeper into the structure, toward the second altar. "There!" Lina shouted, spotting an archway carved with snake motifs, their eyes gleaming with green gemstones. The shadows pursued them, claws raking the walls, leaving trails of sparks. The whisper had become a deafening chant. "We are yours. We are yours." Terrace felt the chill in his bones, but couldn't stop. They burst into a circular chamber where, in the center, stood the second altar, massive, cracked, leaking a faint bluish glow. The same seal was carved upon it, a broken circle, only larger, as if cut by a giant blade. Lina dropped to her knees, unfurling the map. "This is it, Terrace. We have to seal it. But how?" The symbols on the map flickered, as though trying to speak. The shadows filled the room, merging into a single dark mass. Their crimson eyes flickered like stars in hell. One surged forward, its claws nearly slashing Lina, but Terrace shoved her aside. The strike shattered the stone floor instead. "What do we do?" he cried, panic tightening his chest. Lina, eyes locked on the map, reached for the altar. "We need to reverse the ritual. The priests sealed the spirits with blood, so maybe—" She trailed off as the shadows suddenly recoiled, as if something had frightened them. But it was only a pause. The air began to vibrate, and a low moan rose from the cracks in the altar, as if the temple itself had awakened. Lina touched the seal, and her fingers burned. She cried out, but didn't pull back. The vision from the first altar returned. Priests, blood, screaming voices. "Blood! We need to give blood!" she gasped. Terrace paled. "You're serious?" But the shadows were returning, louder and more furious. Lina drew a knife and, without hesitation, slashed her palm. Blood dripped onto the altar, and the seal flared with blinding light. The spirits howled in pain. "Your turn," she shouted. Terrace gritted his teeth, cut his hand, and pressed it to the stone. The light grew stronger, but the shadows didn't vanish. They lunged forward with renewed fury, sensing their time was running out. The altar shook, and the floor beneath it cracked wide open, revealing a black abyss. On the map, a new symbol appeared, an arrow pointing downward. "There's something down there," Lina yelled, just as the shadows closed in. Terrace grabbed her hand. "If we're jumping, we jump together." And they leapt into the chasm as the shadows screamed one last time, and the darkness swallowed them whole. The abyss swallowed Taurus and Lina like the gaping mouth of an invisible beast. The fall lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity, air roaring around them, icy fingers clawing at their clothes. They slammed onto a damp stone floor, and Lina's lantern, miraculously still intact, cast a dim light across a narrow chamber carved into rock. The walls were covered in bas-reliefs, twisted faces with open mouths, eternally screaming in silence. Lina, gasping, raised the map. It now glowed like an ember. "We're close," she whispered, pointing at the arrow leading into a dark tunnel ahead. Taurus, clutching his bleeding hand, looked back. The crack they had fallen through was gone, sealed as if the ceiling had closed behind them. "This place won't let us leave," he muttered, fear tightening his throat. The shadows hadn't followed, but a distant guttural whisper echoed from deeper within the tunnel. Lina stepped forward, her lantern shaking, illuminating more carvings. They depicted the same civilization she had seen in her vision, priests holding daggers above altars, and above them a black cloud filled with eyes, the spirits they had summoned. One panel showed the city in flames, its people fleeing, torn apart by the shadows. They didn't just seal the spirits, Lina whispered, running her fingers across the stone. They sacrificed the entire city to stop them. Taurus leaned in, noticing a new symbol, a broken circle with a smaller one inside it. "Is that the final seal?" he asked, his voice faltering as the tunnel began to hum. The ground trembled. From the darkness, shadows emerged, not one, but dozens, their crimson eyes merging into a burning wall. "You cannot escape," a voice boomed. Lina screamed as her lantern died, but the map in her hands blazed brighter, forcing the shadows to recoil, as if scorched. "This map, it's holding them back," she shouted, raising it like a shield. They ran through the tunnel, shadows clawing at the walls, gouging deep scars into the stone. The passage led into a vast cavern, where a colossal altar stood, engraved with 3 circles. Blood from their wounded palms dripped onto the floor, and the altar began to hum, releasing a pale blue light. Lina looked at the map. The arrow now pointed to the central circle. "We have to finish the ritual," she shouted. But the shadows filled the cavern, their voices forming a chaotic chorus. Taurus grabbed a shard of rock, ready to fight, but the air thickened, pressing down on their chests. Lina pressed her hand against the central circle. Her blood touched the symbol. The glow intensified, but the shadows howled and surged forward. "It's not working," Taurus cried, as one spirit clawed his shoulder, tearing his jacket. Lina didn't release the altar. The map disintegrated into ash in her other hand. But a new symbol flared on the stone, a circle, now fully closed. "We have to finish it together," she shouted, pulling Taurus toward the altar. The shadows were preparing to strike. The cavern trembled as if ready to collapse, and the shadows howled, their crimson eyes swarming the darkness like a hive of enraged wasps. Lina pressed her palm to the central circle on the altar, her blood mixing with the stone. The bluish glow pulsed, but the shadows didn't retreat. Taurus, holding his bleeding hand, stepped beside her. His fingers touched the same symbol, the now fully closed circle. "Together!" Lina shouted. They pressed harder. The glow exploded, forcing the shadows to scream and stagger back, but only for a moment. The air thickened like tar, and Taurus felt his mind being pulled downward. A vision ignited behind his eyes, not like Lina's earlier one, but sharper, as if the city itself were telling its story. Thousands of years ago, this place had not just been a city, but a sanctuary, where people worshipped entities from beyond. Temples reached toward the sky, laced with veins of black stone that channeled the spirit's energy. He saw priests, drunk with power, opening a portal to darkness, summoning shadows that fed on fear and life. The city prospered, for a price. Each month, priests sacrificed dozens of souls, spilling blood on the altars to keep the spirits calm. But one day, the shadows rebelled, ripping priests and citizens apart, while the temples burned in crimson fire. He saw the last survivors, desperate to undo their mistake, build 3 altars to imprison the spirits. Each altar required blood, but not from victims. The priests offered their own, weaving spells to bind the shadows in stone. The city was abandoned, swallowed by the jungle. The seal was meant to hold them forever.
But Taras and Lina had broken the first seal, and the spirits had awakened, starving for new blood. The vision shattered. Taras opened his eyes, drenched in sweat. "Lina, this city, it's their prison," he shouted as the shadows lunged again. Lina, pale, nodded, her eyes burning with resolve. "If we seal this one, they'll be pulled back into the stone." But the altar trembled, blue light leaking through fresh cracks, as if something inside was fighting back. The shadows chanted in unison, "You belong to us." Lina noticed new carvings on the cavern walls, previously unseen bas-reliefs. They showed priests sealing the spirits, but one symbol stood out, 3 circles connected by a single line. "Taras, this isn't the final seal," she cried. "There's a third altar, deeper inside." The shadows swarmed. One claw slashed the air, barely missing Taras. He hurled a stone. It passed through the spirit, useless. Lina pointed to a tunnel at the far end of the cavern, where a faint light flickered. "There!" They ran. The shadows tightened their circle, their claws scratching stone, their screams overwhelming. The floor shook. The bas-reliefs seemed to writhe, faces screaming silently. Taras felt something cold touch the back of his neck, but Lina pulled him forward. The tunnel narrowed. The cries grew louder. Ahead, a third chamber glowed faintly. Perhaps their final chance.
The tunnel narrowed, as if the walls were trying to crush Taras and Lina. Their footsteps echoed, mingling with the piercing whispers of the shadows chasing behind them. Lina's lantern had long gone out, but ahead, a faint greenish glow led them into a chamber where the final altar flickered. The air was stifling, heavy with rot and damp, as if the jungle were digesting life itself. Taras, clutching his wounded hand, felt blood dripping onto the floor, leaving dark stains. "Faster!" Lina shouted as a shadow flew overhead, its claws slicing through hanging vines that crashed down around them. The chamber opened before them, massive, with a domed ceiling carved with grotesque figures reaching toward the heavens. At the center stood the third altar, carved from glossy black stone that glistened like wet obsidian. Upon it, the final seal, 3 concentric circles joined by a curved line that pulsed like a vein. Lina froze, eyes wide. "This is it, the last seal." But the shadows were already pouring in behind them, crimson eyes converging into a fiery storm. Their voice thundered, "We will not stop you." Taras yanked Lina back as a spirit lunged at her, but the altar flared green, repelling the shadow. "They're afraid of it," he shouted, seeing the creatures hesitate. Lina dropped to her knees beside the altar, her bleeding palm trembling. "Blood again, but this time we need to do it right." She recalled the vision. The priests had chanted, spilling blood in a specific pattern to complete the ritual. "Taras, hold on to my shoulders. We have to do this together." They pressed their hands to the seal, blood seeping into the engraved lines. The altar hummed. Green light surged outward, making the shadows scream in pain. But something was wrong. The shadows didn't vanish, they grew denser, their forms solidifying into warriors with hollow eyes. Lina shrieked as a cold breath brushed her neck. "We missed something," she cried, scanning the altar. There, along the edge, faint etchings, ancient words not yet glowing. "It's a spell!" Taras, gritting his teeth, felt a burning sting as a spirit grazed his leg. "Read it, Lina!" he barked, holding her steady. Lina stared at the symbols and began to speak. Her voice trembled, but the words came like a chant. Low, melodic, almost a song. The altar responded. Its glow pulsed in time with her voice. Shadows howled. Some began to dissolve. But the strongest one, the one with ember-red eyes, charged forward. "Your blood is weak," it bellowed, its claws tearing through the air, nearly hitting Terrace. Lina finished the incantation. The seal flared so brightly it blinded them both. Beams of light erupted from beneath the altar, piercing the shadows. They screamed, unraveling into wisps of smoke. But the altar cracked. The floor began to give way. "Hold on!" Terrace shouted as the earth beneath them crumbled. Lina grabbed him as they fell again into yet another void, while the wailing of the spirits mixed with the roar of collapsing stone.
The abyss swallowed Taurus and Lina once more. They landed hard on a pile of rubble, dust rising around them with the scent of ancient stone. The darkness was thick, but a faint green glow from the third altar above illuminated this new chamber, a smaller space with a low ceiling, its walls etched with spirals. The shadows still murmured, but their cries had weakened, as if the seal had drained their strength. Lina, clutching her wounded hand, felt blood drip onto the floor. Suddenly, the stone beneath her ignited, forming a glowing circle marked with the now familiar symbol, 3 connected rings. "Taurus, look!" she cried, her voice shaking as a new vision struck her like lightning. But this time, it wasn't just about the city. It was about them. She saw ancient priests standing against the shadows as the city burned. 2 of them, a man and a woman, offered their blood to the final altar, sealing the spirits. Before dying, they made a vow that if the seal were ever broken, their descendants would return to finish what they had started. Their blood, woven with the spell, became a legacy, tying their fate to this city forever. Lina saw their faces. They looked like Taurus and Lina, reflections across time. The vision ended, and she gasped, eyes wide. We're their descendants," she whispered, pale. Taurus, gripping his shoulder where a spirit had left a searing wound, frowned. "What? What are you talking about?" She pointed at the glowing circle on the floor. "Our blood, it didn't just activate the seal, it recognized us. We weren't drawn here by accident." The spirits gathered in the corner of the chamber howled, but their crimson eyes were dimmer, their strength fading. "You are ours," one last voice roared, but it was weaker than before. Taurus looked at the circle beneath them, glowing steadily. "Then why didn't we know any of this?" he shouted, fear mixing with fury. Lina touched the wall, where the spirals shifted, revealing a niche containing a small stone tomb. Inside lay a yellowed parchment, covered in the same ancient symbols. She picked it up, and the writing flared in response to her touch. "It's their testament," she said. "The priests knew their bloodline would return. They left this for us. We were meant to find this city." The shadows surged, but the circle on the floor flared again, forcing them back. Taurus clenched his jaw, staring at the parchment. "So what now? More blood?" Lina nodded, pointing to the center of the circle, where a shallow indentation formed a stone basin. "We have to finish the ritual." Together they pressed their hands to the basin. Their blood flowed, mingling within the stone. The chamber trembled. The shadows screamed, disintegrating into ribbons of smoke. But one remained, the largest, its eyes burning deep red. It lunged, claws slicing the air, nearly striking Lina. "You will not escape," it bellowed, as the ceiling above began to collapse. "Hold the basin!" Lina screamed. The light exploded, blinding, searing. The final spirit dissolved, but the ground beneath them cracked again, threatening a new fall.
The cave roared, as if the heart of the earth was beating in agony. Cracks widened beneath Terrace and Lina, threatening to swallow them whole. Their blood-slicked hands remained pressed to the stone basin at the center of the glowing circle. A burst of green light erupted, blinding, radiant. The shadows, still writhing through the chamber, screamed one final time. Their crimson eyes flickered, then dimmed, and their forms unraveled into black smoke. The smoke was drawn into the basin, as if into a bottomless void. Lina trembled, whispering the final words of the incantation from the parchment lying beside her. Her voice, raw and strained, melded with the hum of the stone. "Hold it tight," she cried to Terrace, just as the last spirit, massive, burning-eyed, lunged one final time. Its claws slashed the air, but the basin flared with light, and the spirit dissolved in mid-attack, leaving only a wailing echo behind. The tremors stopped. The walls of the chamber fell silent, like the city itself had exhaled in relief. Lina let go of the basin. Her hand trembled, dried blood cracking on her fingers. "Did we do it?" Terrace asked, scanning the now quiet room. The spirits were gone, but the air remained heavy, as if the city still watched. The stone basin cracked, splitting open. From the fissure, a soft golden glow emerged, different from the cold green light of the seal. Lina leaned closer and saw something inside, a small metal box engraved with the same ancient symbols that adorned the altars. "This wasn't just a seal," she whispered, carefully lifting the box. Its surface was warm to the touch. The symbols glowed faintly under her fingers. Terrace, still gripping his wounded shoulder, asked, "A treasure? After all that?" Lina opened the box. A golden light spilled out, illuminating their faces. Inside lay 2 amulets, circular, engraved with spirals similar to those on the temple walls. Next to them, a smaller parchment bore a short inscription. This time Lina could read it. "To the descendants who fulfilled our debt, receive the strength of our bloodline." The amulets pulsed in their hands. Terrace felt warmth spread through him, soothing his wounds. "It's their gift," Lina said, eyes glistening. "The priests left it for whoever sealed the spirits." But the moment of peace was brief. The ceiling cracked again. Dust rained down. "The city's collapsing!" Terrace shouted, grabbing Lina's arm. They sprinted back through the tunnel, the amulets glowing like compasses, leading the way. The jungle roared as they burst into the light. Behind them, the temple crumbled, burying the secrets of the forgotten city. Lina looked down at the amulet in her hand, heavy, but somehow calming. "We weren't just treasure hunters," she whispered. Terrace nodded, gazing back at the vanishing ruins. "We finished what they started." They walked away, the amulets still glowing faintly, each holding mysteries perhaps yet to be revealed. The sun barely pierced the dense canopy of the jungle, casting dim rays over the weary faces of Taras and Lina. They sat on a fallen tree trunk kilometers away from the ruins, now nothing more than a collapsed heap of stone swallowed by the earth. The air still smelled of damp moss, but the whispers of the shadows were gone, leaving only a heavy silence. Lina held her amulet in her hand, a round talisman with an engraved spiral that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Taras, his wounded shoulder wrapped with a strip of cloth, examined his own amulet, feeling its subtle warmth. "This isn't just a trinket," he murmured, watching the spiral shimmer like ripples on water. Lina nodded. Her eyes still sparkled feverishly after everything they had endured. "They left us more than we thought," she said softly, recalling the vision of the priests, their ancestors who had sealed away the spirits at the cost of their lives. But the peace didn't last. In Lina's pocket, where she had tucked a scrap of parchment from the final chamber, something rustled. She pulled it out, and her heart clenched. The parchment, which had been blank after the ritual, now bore new symbols, glowing with a faint crimson hue. "Taras, look," she whispered, holding it so he could see. The symbols had formed into a new map, not of the jungle, but of another place. The contours hinted at a desert, mountains, or perhaps another lost city. At the center pulsed a new mark, 3 spirals, identical to those etched into their amulets. "This isn't over," Taras whispered, a chill running down his spine as if the shadows still watched from beneath the earth. Lina pressed her lips together. "Our ancestors didn't just lock away the spirits. They left us a responsibility." She looked at the amulet in her hand. It vibrated gently, as if answering her thought. Taras shook his head. "I thought we were just treasure hunters, but this feels like destiny." He tried to smile, but his eyes betrayed his unease. The jungle rustled suddenly, not with wind, but with movement, something shifting in the dark. Lina quickly hid the parchment. Taras grabbed his knife, bracing for another threat. But the sound faded, leaving only a bird's cry in the distance. "We didn't survive by accident," Lina said, standing. Her voice had changed now, firmer, as fear gave way to purpose. "These amulets, this map, they're leading us somewhere else. Maybe there are more seals, maybe other spirits." Taras looked at her, his face a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. "Then we keep going," he said, gripping the amulet. "But this time we're more careful." Lina nodded, and together they walked toward the river where their boat awaited. As they disappeared into the trees, a cracked stone slab at the ruin's edge shuddered. A thin fracture ran across its surface, and for a fleeting moment a faint crimson glow flickered in the darkness, as if something was still waiting. In that instant, the amulets in Taras and Lina's hands pulsed in unison, as though warning them. The next chapter was already beginning.
If you're still here, it means the shadows didn't scare you away. Subscribe to Darkroom Narratives for more stories that linger long after the lights go out.